Hey friend, Hector here from StrongestHec.com with this week's Technique of the Week. Today we're going to be closing out our Technique of the Week series on how to improve your kettlebell military press. So part one, we went over understanding and essentially mastering the rack position. So the rack is a very crucial position, and it's that crossroad between getting the bells to the ground and having an effective press. So part one, we covered rack position, we covered neutral fist, making sure we had perfect alignment with that initial knuckle of the wrist, of the fist and the wrist. And then part two, we went over the overhead position, the actual lockout, and kind of reverse engineering that and learning how to actively pull the bell into the rack and essentially getting the forearm and the torso to become one unit. And then at the end, I showed you a pretty cool little hack that I learned from one of our senior Strong First instructors, Woo Chae Yoon of South Korea. I was using a dowel, driving that dowel down to really get the lats, get the lats involved, but also to really tighten up your core, your midsection here, to keep you from leaning back and even over-leaning sideways to achieve that nice lockout position. So today we're going to be using double kettlebells. So I showed you using one bell on parts 1 and 2. Part 3, we're going to be using double kettlebells, and this technique is going to be really subtle, but it's going to have a huge carryover to having a really good press, and it's actually going to eliminate one step that I commonly see people take in the press, and I also used to make this mistake as well. So one of the most important things we want to make sure that we have aligned after we clean the bell to the rack is we want to keep our forearm as vertical as possible. I believe it was chief instructor Brett Jones had used an analogy of like a rocket booster. So I want you to imagine like you clean the bell to the rack, okay, and your forearms are kind of diagonal like this. If you had a rocket booster underneath your elbow, where is that bell going to take off to? It's going to take off this way, right? Probably even knock yourself in the chin. Well, when you clean to this position, kind of like so, when you clean here like this, you can see how my forearm is kind of vertical. This is not an optimal pressing position. So what I'll have to do before I press is I'm going to actually have to take a longer range of motion. I'm going to have to open this bell out and then initiate my press because I'm already starting in this position, and I'll have to open it and then press. And sometimes I even see an exaggerated opening out too wide and then trying to press kind of like you're pressing a pair of dumbbells. And we're not trying to do that with the kettlebell because the nature of the bell has that offset center of mass, and so I want to move that center of mass the least distance possible. The further that center of mass gets away from my center of mass, the heavier it becomes. I actually want to keep it as close to my center of mass as possible. So what we're going to do is we're basically going to adjust how the kettlebell is fixated in the rack position. And I've been playing with this with my push presses and in my jerks, and it also works for the strict press. And I think that you're really going to enjoy this. So the fastest way from point A to point B is in a straight line, correct? Correct. So I don't want to increase this range of motion. I don't want to open out really wide and try to press from here. The groove of the press is going to be like in this 45-degree angle from my body. So right about here is where I'm going to want to press from. You essentially want to imagine that you're pressing a barbell, right? A barbell, you would get underneath the rack, your forearms would be vertical, and then from here you would press straight up, right? You wouldn't open out. With the kettlebell, there'll be some slight external rotation, but you don't want to open out 90 degrees. So what we're going to do is we're going to fixate, and we're going to turn the handle almost like at a 45-degree angle. Our knuckles won't be facing each other. We'll slightly turn them here, and that's going to prepare my forearm. It's going to keep my forearms vertical, and then from here, I'm going to have a straight press to the lockout overhead. All right, so I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. So you'll clean the bells to the rack as normal. So instead of cleaning to this position like this, where my forearms are are kind of at an angle, I want to clean to where my forearms are vertical. Okay, this is the most optimal position to press from. Now, instead of having my knuckles facing each other, I'm going to slightly turn my knuckles to you. I'm going to slightly turn my knuckles right about there. So you can see how my palms are kind of facing you. From here, I have a straight shot overhead to the lockout. And then on the way down, I come down that same exact groove right back to the rack. See, it's a straight press. Inhale back down, active negative. Right back to the rack. Again, turn the bell slightly towards you. I'm not going to have my palms facing each other. This slight fixation towards you. Inhale down. Right back to the rack position. So really subtle. And I like this for the push press and the jerk as well, because we want that straight overhead position. So imagine you clean the bells, you slightly turn them forward, and then from there, as soon as you push, it goes straight up. Boom, to the lockout. It would look exactly as if you're pressing a barbell overhead. Okay? You're in this position, your elbows are slightly forward. Okay? You're not underneath here, your elbows are slightly forward, okay? But your forearms stay vertical. Hands are slightly turned towards you. Inhale and press here. Don't overturn, because then you can lose the bells, disconnect the shoulder, and the elbow flare out. It's a very subtle turn. My shoulders still stay connected. I still maintain this tension through my abdomen. Inhale, brace, glutes tight, quads tight, and then synchronize that breath with the movement. So I'll go through one more time. Okay, clean to a vertical forearm. Slightly fixate by turning the palms towards you, just slightly. Inhale, and then it's a straight shot overhead. Inhale back down, active negative, and again, palms are still facing towards you, tight grip, and you see how that's straight shot. And I come back down, that same groove. It's a little different, very common for the kettlebell press to be taught with this slight external rotation like this, which is not incorrect. We're just kind of eliminating that little piece, slightly turning the palms forward, and then just pressing from right here. Like I said, this is only a 24 kilo. As the bell gets heavier, this center of mass gets bigger. The further that I move that center of mass away from my center of mass, the heavier the bell gets. I want it to stay as close to my midsection as possible. That way from here, I've got a straight shot overhead. Inhale back down, like I'm doing a chin up. Right? That's it. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. That's this week's technique of the week, closing out the 3-part series on how to improve your kettlebell military press. So give that a try, give that some practice, give me some feedback, leave me a comment, or any questions you have in the comment section below. And as I always do with my videos, there's some free resources in there. And if you have any questions, again, leave something in the comment section below. I'm Hector with StrongAsTech.com with this week's Technique of the Week.